You know that feeling. You sit down with a to-do list, hyper-focus, get things checked off that list, get them done. Next thing you know, 2 hours have passed. You've checked your email 12 times. You've watched a video for a recipe for something you're never going to make. You've added 16 things to your Amazon cart that you're never going to buy. You've cleaned your desk and found something else to organize. And it doesn't mean that you're undisciplined or unorganized. It's just that your brain, the same one designed to help you survive in the wild, is just not built for the constant stimulation and multitasking that modern life demands of us. So today we're talking about something that most of us chase, but few of us really master: productivity. We're going to dive into the science behind productivity in general, what's actually happening neurologically when we lose focus, and how to train your brain to work with you as opposed to against you. And we might even bring in a few tools, tips, tricks, and hacks that you can start implementing today. So let's get into it. Hi friends, welcome to the Do Life podcast, where we talk about life, its challenges, and some clever ways to tackle some common obstacles using cutting-edge technology, scientific-based research, and a splash of metaphysical properties. I'm your host, Life Coach Layla, and today we're talking about productivity. So let's start with the basics. What's actually happening in your brain when you sit down and try to focus on something? So when you go to do something important, so whether that's writing a book or report, or cleaning your house, or tackling something important, or doing your bills, whatever it is, your prefrontal cortex kicks in. That's the part of your brain right behind your forehead, and it's responsible for planning and decision-making, and it's basically your brain CEO. And the obvious problem is your brain CEO is very easily distracted. Squirrel. Every time your phone buzzes, a new email pops through. Every random thought like, oh, I need to check that real quick, or I need to look and see if we have these things, or I need to send this text message, or I need to respond to blah, 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 whatever it is. All those thoughts pull your brain away and take you out of focus. And when that happens, your prefrontal cortex actually powers down, and another system called the default network mode kicks in. That's the part of your brain that daydreams, that relives the past, or worries about the future. So every time you get distracted, you're literally switching networks in your brain. And the research shows that every time your brain switches, it can take up to 23 minutes for it to recover. Now, the other key player here is dopamine. And that's the neurotransmitter that drives motivation and reward. And the key thing about dopamine is it doesn't actually spike when you accomplish a task. It spikes when you anticipate a reward. And that's why your brain gets a little hit every time you check your notifications. You're anticipating novelty, something new, something exciting, or rewarding. And this creates what researchers call a dopamine loop. You get addicted to the cycling, to the checking, not the completing. That's why you can scroll on your phone for hours on end and look up and be like, what happened to my life? That was 10 minutes. And in reality, it's 2 hours, because you're scrolling, waiting to get that feel good. And the algorithms know this, and they play these tricks on your brain on purpose. There's even like a lawsuit against certain social media sites because they're strategically addicting you to the scroll. So one of the first steps to learning to retrain your brain is figuring out a way to delay the reward. Finish your task before you reward yourself. If you sit down at your computer to respond to an email, don't check your phones and your notifications. Don't read your other emails prior to accomplishing that task. And then you can reward yourself afterwards as an accomplishment, which will trick your brain into rewarding for tasks done and not anticipation, if that makes sense. It rewires your brain to associate pleasure with focus as opposed to distraction. And let's talk about what's really getting in the way of your productivity. It's not just social media. This is one I struggled with for a long time and still somewhat struggle with currently, and that is the multitasking myth. We've probably heard this before, but it's basically the myth that anyone can multitask. You just have to train your brain or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And I am still struggling with the fact that I can't multitask because I want to do all the things all the time. I mean, I'm a podcast host, a life and business coach, a dark feminine embodiment coach, a travel agent, and a professional mermaid. So yeah, I want to do all the things, but I also know that I can't do all the things all the time because your brain can't truly multitask. When you switch from one task to the next task to the next task, you're rapidly burning through energy. Your brain takes up so much energy to function. And when you're actively switching from task to task to task, it has to redirect and refocus and it's using different parts of your brain for each thing you're doing. When you decide to hyper focus on one thing, or even just focus, it doesn't even have to be hyper focus. But if you decide to focus on one thing, then you're using one area of your brain. You're not taking up as much energy, or you're better able to perform or complete. You're more likely to complete that task if you focus on the one thing. I was struggling for a while with all of my businesses not making any money, which was a problem because I was putting in a lot of hours and a lot of work and doing a lot of things to not have any kind of monetary gain come from it. And the biggest part of that was to try to run 4 businesses simultaneously. I was delayed in a lot of areas that if I would have just focused on one thing and grown it to almost be self-sufficient, then focused on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, then I could have that stair step of actually well-performing businesses. But because I was trying to do all the things all at once, they're all very slow growing and it's taking a long process. It's taking a long time and it's a long process for all of those things to build up to the position where they need to be, where if I would have just focused on building my travel agency and getting clients and having regular trips and repeat clients and customers and buyers and things like that, and then focused on, building my coaching brand and career and things. Basically, the moral of the story is if I would have just focused on one thing, I would have gotten way further along with that one thing as opposed to just switching from thing to thing to thing, which I think a lot of people do on a smaller scale. You go from reading your emails to checking your phones to scrolling through social media to actually doing the work that you're supposed to be doing, to get up and get a snack, to come back and have a conversation with someone and chit chat with someone. So that's why some of the really high performers in a lot of businesses get so aggravated at the people that want to walk around the office and come to your desk and talk to you, because they're interrupting that flow, that focus. And your brain has to redirect. When they leave the conversation, they're done talking to you and you actually go back to work, your brain feels kind of frazzled and disconnected. And you're like, okay, where was I? I have to start over. And it does feel like there's a little bit of overlap so it takes away time and effort and brain power to multitask. And there's a study, I think Stanford did this study that shows chronic multitaskers perform worse on focus tests and actually retain less information over time. So in hindsight, you're not actually training your brain to multitask, you're training it to be easily distracted, which is the opposite of what you want to do when you're trying to be better at productivity, which is what this podcast episode is about. And one of the reasons this is so easy to do is when you're switching from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, you may not necessarily be consciously aware of the fact, but you're making a decision to do that. You're making a decision to pull away from this email that I'm writing to check my notifications. Now, whether or not you're like, I am deciding to do that in your brain, of course you're not actually saying that. At least most people aren't. You're creating a decision, and there's a thing called decision fatigue, and it is a real thing because it takes brain power to decide to pull yourself away from the thing that you're working on and work on something else. That is a decision. And so when you do that constantly in small little incremental incidents throughout the day, when it comes time to making large, big decisions later on in the day or project or whatever it is, you may suffer from a bit of decision fatigue and brain fog. And you're like, why can't I think this through? Because you've already made 457,000 decisions today by switching from one thing to the next. And you're not even realizing that you're putting all that pressure on your brain to do these things that it's really not meant to do. Think about each choice you make, from what to wear in the morning and which emails to answer and respond to, which text messages to look at. It all uses up glucose in your prefrontal cortex. That's energy. So by the time you get to your most important work, which is usually a little later in the day, your brain's already exhausted. Its fuel's low. And so that's why creating routines, even simple ones, frees up a lot of mental load. I know, I want to say it was like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or one of those people wore the same thing every day because that was one less decision to make. It wasn't, what pants do I wear today? What shirt goes with these pants? Do I match? Do I look good? No, it was white button up and cargo pants. I don't know, I'm making the outfit up, but they basically wore the same thing every day because that was one less decision that they had to make. They knew that their brain needed to conserve all of its energy. Hey, so I don't know if you're watching the YouTube or listening to this on any of the other podcast sites, but my computer just decided it needed to restart in the middle of my episode. And the software I use needs to upload before I leave the studio. And obviously when my computer restarts mid recording, it doesn't upload fully. So I believe it left off. I was talking about Steve Jobs or somebody wearing the same outfit every day, so they don't have to make as many decisions. So I apologize if you're watching it and it looks different and I'm at a different angle. I don't know what's going on. Everything, like my phone shut off. Yay, Mercury retrograde. Woohoo! Anyway, so we're going to start off with the next segment. I'm assuming I was probably done rambling at that point, but something else that consumes an entirely unnecessary amount of brain power is not having clear goals, like just a big uncertainty. If you want to train your brain's reward system, it needs clear, definitive, precise goals. It needs to know what it's working towards. If your goal is too vague, like work on project for 2 hours, your brain doesn't know when to release the dopamine. Yeah, you can check back in 2 hours. Did you work on the project? Yeah, a little bit, but if you don't feel like you accomplished enough in those 2 hours that you set aside to work on specific project, you're not going to get that reward. You're not training your brain. You're doing the opposite. Work on a project for 2 hours could look like all the back and forth. You're checking emails, you're sending responses, Googling this thing, you're reading this thing, you're starting this project, you're researching this thing. Like, give yourself something specific, like write the intro paragraph or bio for my webpage. And your brain can visualize completion. It knows when it's over, and then it starts working for you. So when you want your brain's reward receptors to work better for you, you need to give them specific, precise goals and accomplish them. And it doesn't matter how tiny or small or big or whatever. Set a goal, accomplish the goal, and celebrate that goal. Give your brain the chance to reward yourself. I have a whole episode on celebration. I'll link in the show notes because we don't celebrate the wins. I myself am guilty of that as well. Like, I have very much been so focused on the end goal, the end game, and I don't celebrate the tiny milestones in between. One of my life coaches made me sit down and she was like, I want you to look back this entire year, what you've accomplished. It's like, because you're so worried about how far behind you are and all the things you didn't accomplish. Look at what you did accomplish. And when I sat back and actually thought about, whoa, I did the things. And it was a very eye-opening experience. And I think a lot of us could probably really benefit from like taking the time to slow down and think about, what exactly have we accomplished? And reward yourself for those milestones as opposed to just being so hyper-focused on the end game. Because again, work on project for 2 hours. That's the end game. That's what you want to happen at the end of the day. But your specifics can be read emails for 20 minutes, respond accordingly. Don't check your phone while you're doing these things either. Put away any kind of distractions. I know a lot of like really successful people will put their phone in a whole nother room. I have all of the notifications on my phone turned off except for on my watch. I will get text messages and phone calls. So I can quickly glance down and be like, is this an emergency situation? Or is it something I can respond to when it's time for me to respond? And again, even taking time away to look at my notifications is switching my brain's modes back and forth. So if that's something you can avoid doing, do that. But I have children, even though they're grown, I always worry that maybe there's an emergency or something. I want to be available. I will always be available to my children. So there's that. So make sure you're setting clear, specific goals, even tiny goals, especially if you struggle with distracting yourself, giving yourself small goals. Read 5 emails, celebrate that. Read 5 more, celebrate that. Train your brain to reward the small things and stop tunnel visioning on the long-term goals and focus more on what you're doing individually. Something else that will throw off your productivity is inadequate sleep. I did one of my first episodes on this podcast was about how to have optimal sleep. And I know there's probably new science that came out since I made that episode that can probably tell you how to do that better. But I'll also link that episode because sleep is so, so, so important to every area of your life. If you're not getting good quality sleep, you have a hard time losing weight. You hold on to stress. Your cortisol levels are all over the place. Your hormones are out of whack. Like it's a whole thing. Your brain is the biggest energy center in your body and it takes up so much of your resources. And when you don't let it rest and you don't give it sleep, it doesn't get into REM sleep. You don't have good deep sleep. It throws everything else off, especially cognitive function. Whether you notice it or not, it's affected. Because when you're sleep deprived, your amygdala, that's the emotional center in your brain, hijacks control from your prefrontal cortex. And that's why being stressed out makes it hard to think clearly or focus or make decisions. Because your brain's literally prioritizing survival over strategy. Sleep, exercise, hydration. I have done an episode on sleep and hydration. I haven't done exercise because there's so many people that argue about so many things and I just don't want to get sucked into that whole circle. Maybe I will one of these days, but those are just like move your body. Those are very important, integral, key factors to having a nice, functional, healthy brain. And they're not just nice things to have. They're a requirement if you want to be able to focus on anything. So we've covered some of the basics on why it's hard to focus. I want to shift and talk about some ways we can adapt and overcome. I've mentioned this before, the Pomodoro. I'm pretty sure it's Pomodoro. I don't know, however you say it. It's the Pomodoro technique where it's basically where you block out 25-minute increments. And again, you can use whatever methods you think are best. If you struggle with, ADD and really focusing on things, maybe give yourself 5 minutes to do something or 10 minutes, but ideally 25 minutes is the recommended amount of time. And you set a timer and you remove all distractions and you decide whatever it is that you're going to do that exclusively for 25 minutes. And then you give yourself a small break, a 5-minute break where you do something completely different. That's not take a break from whatever project you're working on to check your emails. Let's get up, go walk around, go take deep breaths outside. It's give yourself a break, give your brain a break. But yeah, give yourself 25 to 50 minutes of deep work with no distractions, and then give your brain a small 5-10 minute break to kind of reset and then move on to a different project or the same one. I don't remember the specifics of it, however you want to do it. It's like your brain sprinting for 25 to 50 minutes straight and then taking a break. It helps reset the dopamine and acetylcholine levels. Yeah, think of it like interval training for your brain. Burst of deep focus followed by short intervals of recovery. If you've ever done any kind of like HIIT training or metabolic training, or well, not necessarily, more like HIIT training. So yeah, if you've ever done any kind of like HIIT training, high intensity interval training, think of it like that, but for your brain. And then this other tool you can use, it's pretty close to the Pomodoro technique, but it's time blocking. So as opposed to, do 25, 50 minutes of deep work and rest, this is saying that, 2 hours every day at 9 a.m., I'm going to work on this project. And then you set the short intervals in between that of what specifically you're going to work on. So you can have your time blocks for scheduling purposes and knowing that, every morning when I start work, this is what I'm working on. Your brain loves predictability. So when you can dedicate specific chunks of time to one category, like creative endeavors in the evening, like I try to do my big work that requires a lot of thinking and problem solving early in the morning. And then I save the evening for creative things like scheduling posts and writing content and things like that. Scientifically, that's how our brains are wired. We have more energy, more brain power early on in the day. So I like to use it while it's there. And then we're actually, at some point, your brain switches to be creative. And you want to be in that creative mode a little later in the evening, because then it helps to switch into dream state. And it just seems to work better for me in flow. But like I said, your brain loves predictability. So if you know that every day when you start work, you're going to do 2 hours of this thing and then do that thing, you're reducing decision fatigue. It's like setting boundaries in your brain. It's setting a mental boundary. Brain rewards with more serotonin and less stress. And then it's predictable. So the more you do it, the more in flow you're going to get with it. And then the less it becomes even a thought process, which is going to conserve even more brain power in the long run. Which brings me to habit stacking. If you haven't read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, yeah. I want to say Jim Quick all the time, but I'm like, that's the super fast reader. It's a whole different person than James Clear. So sorry for that. But yeah, the Atomic Habits. So they talk about habit stacking in the book, where it's a neuroscientific concept called Hebbian. That's not important. Neurons that wire together, fire together. Or fire together, wire. Neurons that fire together, wire together. And basically what that means is by pairing a new productive habit with something that you're already doing, you're going to strengthen that neural connection way faster. For example, after I make my coffee, I open up my project dashboard. Over time, your brain starts to expect that flow. Coffee dashboard focus. Once again, leading to less decision fatigue, more brain power conservation, and it's going to be a lot easier to get into the flow and the focus, and your productivity levels will soar. And I know we've mentioned deep work before, but like the actual art of focusing has a lot of neurological benefits. And when we talk about how it takes up to 23, 26 minutes to get back on track, when you're in a deep focus session, like you're intensely focused without distractions, you're not switching back and forth from things, you strengthen the myelin around your neural pathways. Your myelin is like your brain's insulation. Like it makes your signals travel faster. So the more deep work you do, the more efficient your brain gets at doing it. But focus isn't just in your head, it's also in your body. I did a whole episode on nervous system regulation because in order to function properly and be able to focus on something, your body can't be in fight or flight mode or freeze or fawn. It has to be relaxed and capable of focusing on what you're doing. Deep breathing, short walks, even stretching resets your vagus nerve and helps lower cortisol. Because when your body's calm, your prefrontal cortex has the energy that it needs to think clearly. So let me ask you this. When are you losing focus more often? Are you waking up and grabbing your phone and scrolling, and next thing you know, you're late for work? Or 2 hours have passed and you've not made coffee? Or are you overcommitting to too many things at once? Hi, so guilty of that. I think I can do all the things, I want to do all the things, but I don't realistically think about what it actually entails to do all the things. So this is my hill I will die on if I don't change my behaviors. And then also, sometimes it's perfectionism, spending too much time on one task trying to make it perfect instead of just accepting it and moving on. Also guilty of that one. We're working on it, getting better. So I want to challenge you this week to identify your biggest attention leak and plug it with intention or attention or both. Intentional attention. And if you're not sure where to start or you want help building a personalized system that fits your brain and lifestyle, this is exactly the kind of work that I do with my clients. So if you're ready to move from busy to balance, head over to my website. I'll link it in the show notes below and schedule a free consultation with me and see if this is something that we can work on together. Because productivity isn't just about doing more. It's about doing what matters with energy and intention. Let's round out this episode with a few modern tools that you can use to implement all the information you learned today. There are so many apps out there: Rescue Time, Toggle Track, Notion, Todoist, Forest app, Brain.fm. I'm not affiliated with any of these websites or anything, but they are great tools to have. Download them, use them, see what you like, keep the ones that resonate. I like Brain.fm because it has a bunch of different frequencies that help you focus, which is kind of fun. You can also declutter your space. It's really hard to work when the environment is cluttered. And, sometimes if my desk is a mess, I'll move down to the basement. I'll do something somewhere else so I'm not so distracted by all of my impending to-do list. So making sure your environment is focus friendly is super helpful. Like, there's research that shows even just having your phone on your desk, whether it's face down or not, impacts productivity. So put it in a room, turn it on silent, throw it in a drawer, don't even look at it, take it somewhere where you won't be bothered. And again, these are all really small changes that have big neurological impacts. Because your brain isn't broken, it's adaptive, and we've trained it to do the wrong things for a long time. Mostly, most of us, because it's constantly rewiring itself based on what you repeatedly do. So now every time you choose focus over distraction, every time you complete something before you check your phone, and every time you pre-plan your days and activities, you're training your brain to trust you. Again, productivity isn't about grinding harder. It's about understanding your biology and learning how to sync with it. Because when you manage your brain chemistry, energy and attention is when the real progress happens. So I hope you found value today. I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you for being here. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things so I can keep bringing you content. And let's go do life productively. Bye, guys.